Well then, so since Blizzard is giving us a couple of days in between class changes they keep churning out for me to go over, I thought I would be making a couple of videos different in style. I wanted to highlight some of the specs that have improved the most coming into Shadowlands in this video, and then make an opposite video highlighting some of the specs that have weakened the most coming into Shadowlands, or did not get what they requested the most, what was their biggest complaint, their biggest crutch, what they wanted to be fixed, and it didn't happen. In this video in particular, we will be go over and look at 5 or 6 specs that have gotten better coming into Shadowlands. This is purely from a gameplay perspective. Their rotation, their cooldowns, the variety on their talent trees, anything of this that could have improved heavily coming into Shadowlands from BFA. This doesn't mean, by the way, that improving and being some of the specs that have improved the most makes you OP or flavor of the month or very strong. Some of the specs that have improved can still be bad. The same way, some of the specs that have lost a lot or did not get any of the improvements they wanted are not going to be weak necessarily or terrible. This has mostly to do with the way they play, the improvement in their gameplay department. There are plenty of specs that won't be mentioned here, for example Frost Mage or Evoke Demon Hunter, that didn't really change that much coming into Shadowlands, but at the same time they were fine before. They were strong before, they are strong now. They don't need to be in this list. So let's go over the specs that have gotten the most improvements, the most positive changes and well requested additions to their specs coming into Shadowlands. The first of our improved specs coming into Shadowlands is Protection Paladin. Now I could stop mentioning all the other improvements and stop just at the first one, which is the change from cooldown based defensives to holy power based defensives. Protection Paladin went from having the base cooldown of Light of the Protector, their heal, and Shield of the Righteous, their armor increase, to having Word of Glory, the new Light of the Protector, and Shield of the Righteous to be based on holy power. This is very strong because you will be generating more holy power than the speed of the cooldown that you had in BFA. Even at a end of expansion, 50% haste, full of corruption, full of borrowed powers, Protection Paladin, you still would not have gotten your defensives back as fast as you can now with holy power generation. It's just faster now. This is inherently better for your gameplay. And you can choose between the armor and the heal, which makes you stronger for magical damage taken. Before, your only defense against magical damage that you could use often was your heal, which was on an 18-second base cooldown. Now your heal is just on a 3 holy power cost, the same as your armor. So you can always choose it when you are taking magic damage, which is straight up an improvement to your game style and gameplay in BFA. Some of the other talents have been made also much better for the choices you can have, like Blessed Hammer, going from reducing the damage by the enemy's next auto attack to just reducing the damage taken by the next damage they do, which is just more versatile for all sorts of damage. Redoubt has been changed to also be much better. First Avenger has been changed to be much better for Mythic Plus, and the rest of the talent tree has also been improved. Back in BFA, Paladin had some very boring talent rows. The level 60 row with Retribution Aura. Retribution Aura is finally gone. Yes, it's a passive, shitty aura you can choose, but it's gone from the talent tree. Paladin also had a very boring row in BFA, the level 75 row, Unbreakable Spirit, Final Stand and Hand of the Protector. That has been blown up and spread throughout the talent tree for Shadowlands. Unbreakable Spirit now takes the place of Retribution Aura. You have Final Stand going all the way to the last talent row, and Hand of the Protector going to another one of the boring talent rows of BFA, the level 90 row. Judgment of Light, Consecrated Ground and Ages of Light. Ages of Light is now gone, and Hand of the Protector take its place. This makes the choices of Protection Paladin much more varied and much better coming into Shadowlands. You have stolen from Holy Paladin, and you took Sanctified Wrath as a talent and Holy Avenger as a talent to give you even more choices for your cooldowns. You have lost Last Defender, which was your meme, cheese talent for damage reduction against multiple enemies, but now you have more balanced options across your talent trees and your talent rows. It makes it much more smooth and gives you way more option when you want to choose how you want to play. Considering all these changes came in without Protection Paladin losing too much, either their borrowed powers or their Azerite traits, some of their strongest Azerite traits have been cooked into some of their talents, like the First Avenger's talent giving you the Absorb Shield on your Avenger Shield. And with all these better improvements, it's just now a much more smooth pack to play. So this is why it fits very nicely into specs that have improved the most and changed the most for the better coming into Shadowlands. Another of the very improved specs, staying next to Prot Paladin, is fellow tank Brewmaster Monk. Brewmaster Monk has received quite a few changes, not very drastic, but all very nice. You know, Brewmaster was already a very fun, like smooth working spec in BFA that had a few, you know, creaks here and there, and the change with Shadowlands has actually improved quite a bit of these annoyances when it came to the rotation. First of all, some of the new baseline things are helpful, like Clash coming back, like Spinning Crane Kick being baseline to give Brewmaster more AoE, as well as Touch of Death also becoming baseline for Brewmaster. That is going to have the very nice addition, Brewmaster, to clearing your stagger based on 200% of the damage you do, which is a nearly guaranteed complete reset of your stagger, which is a legit defensive cooldown now. Some of the better changes were the removal of the annoying, boring and repetitive maintenance usage of Iron Skin Brew for Shuffle. Shuffle is now going to do what Iron Skin Brew did, except with a 100% uptime in the background of your rotation. It's pretty much going to be always active when you use your normal abilities, and it's going to do Iron Skin's Brew job without you having to constantly click that button. That is going to feel much better for your rotation. What's going to feel even better is that in your talent tree, Guard is finally gone, because it's now again in your base abilities in the form of Celestial Brew. Celestial Brew is now going to be an absorb, empowered by how much you purified of stagger from your Purifying Brew, and that is going to give more diversity and flexibility to your spec. The ability to have some sort of self-healing, some sort of absorb for yourself. Talking about absorb and a little bit more of self-reliance, you are also getting a much better version of Expel Harm coming into Shadowlands. This version of Expel Harm is a minor heal on a 5-second cooldown, but most importantly, the heal can be empowered by your spheres that are going to be absorbed by Expel Harm and used to heal you, which can become a quite hefty heal when used properly. That is more variety, more versatility and more diversity in your rotation, in your build, and in your choices when you're fighting. You're also getting an extra base cooldown because Invoke Nuzao is now baseline as an extra, just because you can also dual wield now as a Brewmaster Monk just fine. If you hated staffs, the staves. The rest concerning Brewmaster Monk has remained rather similar. Their talent tree has remained nearly unchanged except for the removal of Guard and the baseline of Invoke Nuzao, but it was very smooth before, but some of the bigger problems have been smoothened out even more now. That's a very nice change coming into Shadowlands. You will have even more things to do. At times, some people are worried that you will have too many GCDs, too many abilities to click at the same time, but it is definitely better of an issue to have than scarcity of variety, scarcity of options in your build, in your rotation. So it's a very nice state to be in for Brewmaster Monk. So now that we are done talking about tanks, let's talk about some DPS. We're talking about Elemental and Enhancement. Let's make a little stop for Elemental before we go over Enhancement. Elemental has received quite a bit of very nice changes coming into Shadowlands as opposed to BFA. They lost some of the more boring maintenance talents, you know, talking about boring and maintenance stuff for BRM with Iron Skin Brew. Shaman also lost Totem Mastery. They gained some more interesting stuff. No, not this piece of shit. This one doesn't exist. This one. Echoing Shock is very nice. It gives you way more variety of things you can do with this. A lot of their damage has been improved baseline by quite a bit. It didn't feel very nice playing Elemental in BFA when your base abilities hit less than what a Warlock used to hit in BOD. It just felt like you were hitting for very little and you were putting too much value on your Earthshock. Now it's definitely changed. Now Earthshock is like your third or first most damage abilities, especially with your heavy Lava Burst damage now, which feels very nice. A little caveat when it comes to Elemental. Some of their better changes are tied to borrowed powers. Their Covenant ability Primordial Wave when it comes to cleaving, as well as their Legendaries. Deeply rooted elements for cleave and spread cleave with your Flame Shock and Lava Burst spread, and the change to Ascendance to have an active effect, as well as Echoes of Great Sundering. Extremely good when it comes to, of course, AoE, but also when it comes to cleave. One of the bigger problems I mentioned all the times I mentioned Elemental Shaman was their lack of cleave. The fact that they either hit one target or they hit 5. In the middle, they had a void, a dead zone. This legendary greatly improves their power in that window, which makes them much stronger, but unlike the previous two specs I mentioned, who got their changes baseline, these good changes for Elemental are more tied to borrowed powers. Now on to the real change for the Shaman spec, which is Enhancement. Enhancement got rid, massive rework, double massive rework, because first was Fulmination and then back to Maelstrom, but changed because it's no longer Maelstrom as a resource. Now it's just a number of stacks. You went from Maelstrom Weapon as a passive to this entire fucking thing. You gain stacks, and every 5 stacks you get an instacast of Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt. And then Stormbringer has been changed. Stormbringer before was the entirety of your build as enhancement. It was a slot machine build. It was a, let's hope I can click Storm Strike 10 times in a row. Now Stormbringer is just a good buff, but it's not as strong as before. It doesn't proc off of auto attacks anymore. It just procs off of abilities you click, which is obviously much less hits than your auto attacks. The build that Enhancement is getting in Shadowlands is extremely varied. It gives you a lot of options. A lot of boring, baseline, soulless, passive talents have been removed. Things like Hailstorm, you know, flat out extra damage on your Frostbrand, or things like Boulder Fist and Searing Assault. Extra damage on your Rockbiter and extra dot damage on your Flametongue weapon. You know, they're fucking terrible. They're boring. They don't do anything. Your maintenance abilities like Flametongue and like Frostbrand are gone. Now you have talents like Hailstorm reworked, which is much better to play, much better to use. It gives you a very nice active that you can use for cleave and 5 target AoE basically. Things like Ice Strike, again, it's interactive, it does something. You have now Flame Shock and Frost Shock you can use for your rotation. Flame Shock for spread, DOT, AoE, which you can complement with Fire Nova, and then you have Frost Shock for extra single target damage. You can choose now Elemental Blast as well. You can complement some of your options in your rotation with very good legendaries, particularly the Legacy of the Frost Witch, when it comes to extra variety and extra change in your rotation, resetting the cooldown on your Storm Strike when you consume your stacks of Maelstrom weapon. There has been quite a lot of changes when it comes to Enhancement, and it looks just much more smooth and flows much better. You have way more options. This is something I mentioned already in the rankings of Enhancement, which I didn't put as an extremely strong spec by any means. It's just better to play. It's more varied. We have more options for cleave, AoE and single target. Way more talents to choose from. Admittedly, the legendary system is a little bit tunnel visioned on a single very strong legendary right now. It could change in the future, but for now it's just a very nicely improved specs in the amount of choices you have and the amount of variety you have for your abilities and talents. But in extra time, Shadow Priest comes in and ruins everyone's day, because it is Shadow Priest, the most improved spec coming into Shadowlands. The whole basis of BFA Shadow Priest was get Insanity to get into Void form, try to stay inside of Void form, get all of your stacking buffs and stacking damage increases, extra haste, reduced Mind Blast cooldown, etc, etc. In Shadowlands this is gone. Void Eruption is going to be a 90-second cooldown, which is just a burst damage, which is going to put you into Void form for 15 seconds, and that's just going to be a 20% more damage done boost, and that's it. No more synergy, no other things that are going to touch your Void form, Void Eruption rotation. Your Insanity is now a builder spender. You build Insanity to spend it on single target for Devouring Plague and AoE for Searing Nightmare. The spec has received plenty of positive changes. The Shadow Word Death is baseline, thankfully, with a very strong talent associated with it, that Madness. You add terrible old talents being changed, like Dark Void, 30-second cooldown to spread your Shadow Word Pain, and that was it. Now you have Searing Nightmare, which is ridiculously strong. It's already been nerfed, but it's still strong in the way it works, spreading Shadow Word Pain and doing burst of damage every time. Shadow Crash has been improved for being an ability on a 20-second cooldown. Now it has 45-second cooldown, but has 3 charges and does stacking damage if you use it on a single target, which is more versatile. It gives you more value even if you use it on a single target, like you couldn't before. You're given other good quality of life options if you want, from Unfurled in Darkness to Damnation, extra burst options for your Void form with Ancient Madness. Other good things that the Priest has gotten in their base is that Legendaries also give you good options. Shadow Flame Prism is for very good AoE, and then Talbedar Stratagem and Eternal Call are for single target. They're very nice options. Devouring Plague has been improved over time in the beta already. Now it stacks damage on top of itself, so you never feel bad for capping in Insanity and having to waste it because Devouring Plague is still running on the target. Now you can just stack it up, like if you were a mage with Ignite. Overall, these changes are all very positive for Shadow Priest. They still have some problems that they are not very tanky, they're not very versatile, they can't move too much when they want to do their damage. Some of their improvements also make them a little bit more static, even though they are very good. You can now cast Searing Nightmare while casting Mindsear, and when you proc Dark Thoughts, you can now use your instant Mind Blast while channeling Mindflay and Mindsear without breaking it, which is amazing for your rotation. It doesn't feel like you're clunky and obstructing your rotation when you want to do something else. Now this feels very nice, but as a result you're still very immobile. But all of these changes are very, very good for your rotation. They just make you way more smooth. There are way more options, and it makes you way more versatile in the profile damage you want to do. You have burst now as a Shadow Priest. This is almost like a banned word in the Shadow Priest world that they haven't had for like 6 expansions. Actual burst damage and actual burst cooldowns. Now you have them. Now you have the options for that. So overall, Shadow Priest has been changed, and has been changed very nicely. So the crown, for now, likely for the future as well, since we're nearly done, really, with changes, goes to Shadow Priest. And Shadow Priest was the last one of our improved specs coming into Shadowlands. Honorable mention goes to Guardian Druid. Several positive changes and good improvements, although just not quite enough to make it in here. The next video is going to be the exact opposite, about the least improved specs coming into Shadowlands, or specs that have lost too much coming into Shadowlands and have been left crippled. You guys free to predict which one of the 5, I think, specs that are going to make it in there. And while we wait, in the meantime, I'm going to sleep.